What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of PodScum. I'm your host, Reckless Rex Ruger, your bastard of ceremonies. That, of course, if you couldn't tell by those enormous teeth right there, you can't miss them, is the Freddie Mercury puppet. Welcome to another episode of PodScum, where the cool kids come to chop it up with your boy, Rex Ruger, a.k.a. Diamond David Lee Roth Jr. And just to affirm that, what I already know, I'm going to stop and admire the view, kids. It hurts to look this good. And when I need a little help, kids, this is what I go to. You won't look this good, but you can probably up your game several notches. And that's what it's all about. My guest is here. We're getting down to it right away and chopping it up. I'm pumped. You should be pumped. Let's be pumped together. Ted!
Hey, oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you and see you perfectly, man. I think.
Awesome.
Yeah, good. Hey, man.
Right.
Hey, man. I saw the first thing I saw in the frame was a lot of hair.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's listen, man. First of all, thanks for doing this, man. It's a real pleasure to meet you, man.
Yeah, it's great to meet you. Thanks for having me, man. I'm really stoked.
I love what you guys do, man, because I've seen you guys say in other interviews, man, that you're doing a good classic rock sound, with certainly elements of blues in there, man. But you also seem to pay homage. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, man. I can hear lots of elements of the grunge scene, for lack of a better word. I know they hated that term, and I love that though, man. Like I've heard, if I'm not mistaken, you guys citing people like Chris Cornell, bands of that, of having some kind of an influence on you.
Yeah, I mean, we mix in basically anything and everything that we dug, especially coming up. And, I'm not, admittedly, me personally, I'm not the biggest grunge fan, but like I love like Alice in Chains and Soundgarden and STP and just any band that had like kind of an interesting, especially like guitar sound or something like that. Yeah. That's kind of like outside of the norm, I guess you would say. I really dig that. And I think we try and add that into our style. Kind of like more of the alternative thing, at least on the heavy guitar rock kind of side of it.
Yeah. When you guys are sitting around to create, what's typically the creative process like when Stone Horses are going to get together and make music? Does someone come in with the bulk of the ideas, or are you guys collaborating?
It's a little of both. John, John's a great writer, and like lately he's been writing a lot of stuff that he's just like, oh, I got this idea, and it's pretty much already maybe not 100% completed, but the crux of it's there, and I kind of just help shape it. But a lot of times I'll come in and I'll have like a riff, or I'll have the music already done for something, and he adds his 2 cents, and we kind of do a little of everything. Some of the best songs actually started with him being like, hey, I got this idea, and he'll sing me something on his phone, and then that will have me kind of, the wheels will start turning, and I'll come up with something. Sometimes it sounds similar, sometimes it's totally different. End of the World, it was like that. It started as like the riff was kind of like something he had on his phone, and I took that and we kind of made it our own and wrote the music around it, and then he wrote all the lyrics, and it just kind of came into something amazing. And that's a lot of the best songs that we've come out with, I think, started from that. But it's a little of everything, a lot of times, sometimes during rehearsal, I'll make a mistake and come up with a riff or something, or come up with an idea that leads to something. And then before you know it, we're in the studio making a new song.
Little accidental serendipity. Once in a while. Yeah, you just kind of fall into a song. That's kind of a nice way to have art kind of unfold, right? I mean, just
those are my favorites, because then you never know how it's going to turn out, and it's just it's like discovering a new friend or something, making these new songs. I love it.
Now, who are a couple names? Throw me out a couple names of some guitar players, man. You might be one name, might be a couple, man, that you feel have had the most influence on your style of playing or your approach to the instrument.
For me, Ace Frehley will always be number one. He, I'd never heard of Kiss. Like I knew the Beatles and I knew the Stones, but when I discovered Kiss, I was watching, they used to have a channel called VH1 Classic that would show, concerts, and they had Kiss live at the Summit in '77, Love Gone Alive, and just seeing Ace with the guitar smoking and just Gene spitting blood is like, that was it for me. As soon as that
I feel
happened,
like me being 51 years old, I should be telling you that there was a VH1 Classic at one time. But yes, for all you kids out there, for all the kids that are of this generation, there was a time when they actually played music videos on these channels, kids.
It was great. And it's funny because like I came in right at the tail end of that because I never got to experience like MTV or any of that,
Yeah.
but that was kind of like the next best thing for
Yeah.
me. And it was always on like late at night. It would be like midnight or something. So I'd stay up at
Yeah.
like 2 a.m.
Well,
as
yeah.
a
Well,
kid watching
it
that
was a big
stuff.
deal to stay up on a Saturday night for Headbangers Ball, man. I remember that was
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
must, and that didn't even get going until like until like midnight. So, and then if you were into extreme metal, sometimes you had to wait until like 1:30, 2 in the morning to see those Cannibal Corpse videos or those obituary videos or like the real extreme death
Yeah.
metal. You know.
Well, that's how I got into Megadeth was through that because I heard Peace Sells, and that was another one where I was just like, "What is this? I've never heard
Yeah.
anything like him." You know,
Yeah.
between Chris Poland and Dave Mustaine, it was just like, "Whoa!" You know, this was
So
just
what
blew
is it
my
about
mind.
Ace Frehley's, man? As a guitar player, man, like what is it about Ace in particular, man, that you've kind of locked into?
It's everything, man. It's the way he moved, the way he played. He just had this such an aggressive style, yet at the same time, it was very approachable. It had a lot of these like songs within a song kind of thing, but at the same time, you know, if you watch him play, I mean, he's just hitting the thing like as hard as
Yeah.
he can with like
Yeah.
everything. It's just so much power and you know, it almost just like this, you know, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on here or not, but he
No,
just,
go ahead.
you
Yeah.
know, he just had this like I don't give a fuck mentality to his
Yeah.
playing. It just
Yeah.
hit me. I just loved it. It was just everything about it. The way like, you know, the King of the Nighttime World where he'd hit a note and it would just start feeding back and he turned the
Yeah.
feedback into like part of the song. It was just
He's
it blew
probably the
my
guy.
mind, you know.
He's probably the guy that gave credibility to Kiss, as far as like because I don't think
Yeah.
they're on record anywhere is saying that they're virtuoso players. I think they know that their sound is limited, man. But Ace almost seemed like he was almost, you know, not to impugn the other guys, man, but almost a little too qualified for the job, you know.
Yeah, he was definitely the best musician in the band, at least of the original four.
Yeah.
And he was the most rock and roll. He had you know, I was telling someone this the other day. He was like the perfect member because he had this almost like androgynous thing, but at the same time, you know, he was a guy that used to be in gangs in the Bronx. So,
Yeah.
you know, he had that kind of like violent rock and roll thing kind of going
Yeah.
at the same time. And it was just a really good mix. And then that mixed with the other guys, I think it was just, you know, it was like the Beatles on steroids almost.
Yeah. He also
Everything
seemed like
that was
he also
great
seemed like
about
the guy that could naturally do the talking too, because it seemed like early on they kind of shied away from doing a lot of press. But Ace is a very talkative, gregarious guy when you see him, you know, I mean, like in interviews and stuff.
Well, and I think that's the other thing that I really liked about him was, you know, I don't mind the rockers that like, you know, that were too cool for school, but like he's
Yeah.
more like me where, you know, he's funny and he's like more of a comedian. He's like
Yeah.
off the wall. He'll say something that's just like totally bizarre and you're like, what? You know,
Yeah.
and I'm like that in public, you know, I'd try and get a rise out of people and say
Yeah.
stuff that's just
Yeah.
bizarre.
Well, so you must have had a really fun. Well, so you must have had a really fun time then, because I know that like we've talked, you know, offline in messages and been cultivating and setting this interview up, and you know, getting our schedules in sync or whatever. And you just came back from a tour, and you must have seen some debauchery and some shenanigans going on with the Steel Panther guys. I mean,
it was fun.
yeah,
It
I would
was
imagine.
different.
I imagine being out with those guys would be a blast.
It was the time of my life, man. I'll tell you that. I would love to go back out with them anytime.
Yeah.
That was just for me anyway. It was the tour of a lifetime, and guys could not have been nicer. They couldn't have been cooler. They're just you know down to earth guys, but they still want to have fun and rock and enjoy like you know the rock and roll side of this.
Yeah,
You know,
and
they
for
don't
people
take
that don't know,
themselves
and
too
for people that
seriously.
don't know, their gig is somewhat over the top, glam, kind of done,
Oh, it's
kind of
over
tongue
the
in cheek.
top.
You know what I mean? You know,
Yeah, well, you know, and the thing with them is like, you know, technically, I guess you could say they're a comedy act, but
right?
they can play. I mean,
They have
they are
chops. Yeah,
amazing musicians.
yeah,
You know, Satchel and Michael especially, just incredible and great performers too.
yeah,
And they're also very talented, you know, comedians. Like we watched them night after night, and there were very few things that were repeated. Most of it was just them playing off the audience, you know, on a comedic side and a musical side too. But
yeah,
you know, it's just they're just funny and they're like everything that we loved about the 80s style you know, metal acts. Cause you know, those guys would, you know, I think people look back that didn't live that or weren't into it and they're like, you know, oh, you know, they don't get it. But the thing is, those guys didn't take themselves too seriously either. It was all
no,
about having fun.
yeah. And
You
look, when all
know.
the dust settles, too, those hair metal bands are still making a viable living out there, going out and playing
Oh
those
yeah.
old hits. I mean, you know, Great White and Slaughter, you know, come
Yeah.
swinging through my area like every 2 years, and the casino is packed. People go out for
Yeah.
those like nostalgic, you know, those nostalgic type shows. You know, the Def Leppards of the world. You know, I mean, those
Yeah.
bands are still drawing big crowds out there. you know? So, I mean, call it hair metal or not, man, but those guys have quietly laughed all the way to the bank and
Well,
and long
exactly. I
careers.
call it, it's all rock and roll to me because like when I was growing up, I was listening to, both with the 70s and 80s. I listened to Warrant and Rat and Poison and Motley and Slaughter and just as much as I listened to like Megadeth and Metallica,
Right.
all those bands, Kiss, Aerosmith, Zeppelin,
Yeah.
Whitesnake, Deep Purple. I mean, to me, it was all rock and roll.
Yeah. And the songs hold up too. The songs hold up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we saw my buddy Scotty and I went up to see, it was Slaughter and Ace Frehley doing the Mohegan Sun Arena.
Yeah.
And the place was packed. And Slaughter, everyone there knew every single word to every single song. And
Great guys,
it's
too.
really cool singing something like that in unison with that kind of a big stage. And I love that.
I always have a soft spot for Mark Slaughter. He was one of my first interviews ever, man. I got to interview him backstage at a concert, but he couldn't have been the nicest guy. And shout out to him. Yeah, he never forgets. He never forgets anything either. He's got like a photographic memory. Yeah, if you had a conversation with him and then came up to him 10 years later, he'd remember like who you were and where he met you.
We got to meet him. So my buddy Scotty's really good friends with him. He knows his wife. They were like best friends for a while, so they kind of all know each other. But I got to meet him a couple years ago, and I never met this guy in my life, and just off the bat could not have been the nicest guy.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, if you want any help with this or that musically, or this guy for like amp stuff. We were talking about like Kempers and stuff like that, which I'm more into the real amps or whatever. But just the fact that he was he was willing to like do this to someone he just met. It was just like, could not have been cooler, nicer, more down to earth. Great guy.
I always felt bad, man, because Slaughter fucking put out their first album, Stick It To You, and it came out in 1990, and that's kind of almost when the party was getting over with the 80s metal, and like it was almost like a cathartic, like a cleaning out process. Grunge kind of came in, and the songs were more, it was more about being dark and brooding and gloomy around that time, and like the 80s kind of, fun metal was kind of fading out. So I feel like had Slaughter started in about 84, they would have been huge.
Well, the thing with them, and Mark talks about this, they were the last, I'm pretty sure they were the last band to go from starting from scratch to headlining arenas and then back down again. Like I think they were it. Because like you said, that was 1990. That first album was huge. The second album did okay. The tour, I think they got to headline the arenas for like a hot minute, and then by the end of that, grunge was in. But more power to them. I mean, I would kill to even just have that.
And now, so who's the person in your band, or maybe it's several guys that that infuses the blues into it? Because the blues is obviously, and I've heard your bandmate John Allen say in interviews, man, that despite you being a young guy, and even at the time when you started the band, you were a young guy. That he described you as having an old soul. You know what I mean? Yeah. So does that mean that you're into all that blues stuff? And obviously the blues has a rich storied history all the way back to the Robert Johnson days, and one of the oldest forms of music. When did you attach yourself to the blues? Are you the one that infuses that into the band?
I think, I think we all do, but John and I especially do. For me, like I love Robert Johnson. I love the old stuff. I used to listen to, because he actually, for a guy that really wasn't, alive that long, he has a lot of recordings out there. Yeah. So even now I'm hearing stuff that I'd never heard before, like, it wasn't called B-sides back then, but, outtakes and this and that. Right. But for me, the blues side that really influenced me was like the British blues. Like I love Cream, Clapton, John Mayall. He, those first handful of albums with Clapton and Peter Green and Mick Taylor. Yeah. Love that. And Peter Green too, like later with Fleetwood Mac, just that kind of style. I think that was like the perfect mesh of like taking what the old guys had started and then infusing it with like a new energy. Yeah. And that's kind of what I think I try and emulate the most, but I still love, I've always loved the old blues records, the old guys just sitting like with an acoustic guitar and nothing else that can just come up with these real, kind of songs that come from the gut.
It's crazy because they're just sitting there on a stage in a stool with a guitar, but yet they can find a way to be so captivating artistically. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah, and it's very much a it's from the soul, from the gut, just what you're feeling at that time, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all honestly there thrown out. And I just always thought that was really wild. And I'm trying to get better at doing that. You know, I've been into the
Yeah.
electric side so much, but you know, a lot of times I try now and just sit with like an acoustic or something and just kind of start hitting the thing and seeing what comes out and just going from there. And it's a good tool for songwriting too.
Well, you guys
Uh,
rock balls out a lot on a lot of the fucking songs, man. But you guys do have some, like, I guess would be called more on the ballad side.
yeah. Well, I talk with John about this a lot. He keeps saying, which I think is the perfect description. We want to be like the best of like light and dark. You know,
Yeah.
we can do, you know, this more straight up high energy Kiss, AC/DC kind of thing, Guns N' Roses, and then at the same time, you know, kind of like Zeppelin did. The next song could be you
Yeah.
know, like we had a song on the first like EP called Roads that I think is a perfect example of that. It's way more I don't know if I'd call it a ballad, but it's definitely an unconventional kind of more back to basics type of track,
Yeah.
but still, you know, interesting and produced and, you know, stuff like that. I think having both of that is kind of a good balance. Now, I lean more towards the high energy stuff that goes over better live, obviously, but
Yeah.
we, you know, occasionally when we do a headline show, like we'll pull out some of the more, I don't know if you call it slow tunes or stuff
Right.
like that and try and make it more of an experience, you know?
But that was the formula back in the day. If you remember, especially now we're talking about the 80s, that used to be like you'd come out with the rock song and then you
Yeah.
follow it up with the power ballad, you know? It's like Warrant would put out Down Boys and then they come back with Heaven, you know what I mean? Or like
Yeah.
you always put out the rocker and then you had that in the 80s, you had to follow it up with you had to have the power ballad.
My goal is to write like a really, really strong, like true power ballad type of song.
Yeah.
I think that would be really wild. And actually, you know, John's other band, Charm City Devils, I mean, they had some great ballads. Like he was a, you know, John's
Yeah.
a great writer. And
He's got a great voice too, man. How do you link up
yeah.
with a guy like that, man? Did he have that band first, or did he form the band with you? You guys have been Stone Horses have been around since 2016, if I've got that right.
Yeah, it's about late 2016, early 2017. 2016, we spent most of the time writing and recording, and I
Yeah.
think we finally we finally had a live show, and it was either late 2016 or early 2017. But I actually linked up through him. I was in a band called Mach 22 with
Yep.
Jaron Galino, who
I've
you
had him
know,
on. Yep. Nice guy.
and at the time, John was doing Charm City Devils, and they needed a fill-in bass player, so they got Jaron to do like 4 or 5 shows. And I went to one of them with him, and John, who I had known him a little bit prior because some of my older bands opened up for them, and
Yeah.
Mock I think opened up for them once, and he was like, "Hey, you know, we have this big tour coming up, and our 2 guitar players they got to miss some dates at separate times. So, you know, we need someone that can come in and learn both parts, which were 2 totally different parts,
Right.
and just
Right.
kind of tour with us and fill in for this guy this week and then fill in for that guy that week." And I came out, we did the East Coast with the Winery Dogs. I think we did a handful of headline shows, and then we did the West Coast with Slash. And that was about maybe a month on the road. And I just came in, and I guess I impressed him enough.
Some good
You know,
names.
afterwards,
Dude,
he's like,
that's some good names on the resume right there.
yeah,
Yeah.
really.
You
It
know.
was amazing.
Eh,
And he was basically just like, hey, you know, I want to start another thing that's kind of like this, but more of like a bluesy alternative thing. And I'm like, you know, at the time I was kind of experimenting with trying to really get into that kind of like ZZ Top bluesy kind of thing. And we just started writing together. And before you know it, we, you know, had one song and then another. When we started, it was originally going to be John was going to play drums and sing because he's a great drummer too.
yeah, I read that. Yep.
And we had it set up. We had this going for like a week before we decided, yeah, this isn't going to work. But we had like my guitar going through a guitar amp and then this pedal that was like an octave pedal going through like a bass rig. So it was
Yeah.
like a big 2-man band or something. And it was
Yeah.
cool. But I think we both decided like, you know, it needs to be a band. And
Yeah.
we eventually ended up with a guy named Rick Reynolds on bass, who I love him, still friends with him. And Jason from Charm City Devils on drums. And it just clicked. And you know, the rest is history. We just went off and, you know,
So
made it
now
happen.
So now I've got to add alt blues or alternative blues to the list of the insurmountable list of genres we already have. You've invented alt blues.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
We can coin it. Yeah. I mean, and that's kind of the other thing. It's like, I kind of go both ways. Like part of me is like, don't reinvent the wheel too much. It's rock and roll. But on the other hand, it's like, let's do something that hasn't been done
Interesting.
before.
Yeah.
And I think we've hit a good middle ground with
Yeah.
that. I think experimenting and having fun and kind of trying to come up with something new is important. But at the same time, sometimes I just need to, plug a Les Paul into a Marshall and hit a bunch of chords. I think actually the Cult is a great example of that because I kind of look up to them in a way because they kind of started out, their sound at the time was like totally unique and different,
Right.
like nothing else. And
Yeah.
then, come was it Love Removal Machine, where it's just like, you know what, we did it. We took it as far as I can go. Let's just plug a Les Paul into a Marshall and be a
Yeah,
rock
that's a
band.
perfect example. That's a perfect example of the kind of band that I would almost like equate you guys with, man. Like a band that kind of, the Cult did do something interesting. Like they were, they were able to maintain a degree of respect, in that more commercial rock thing. But then they were also respected by like the more heavier bands too.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, number one, because I
Yeah.
love them to death. But
I mean, they're absolutely amazing in the fact that they would just all metal genres encompassed together, man. They're a band that would have the respect of all of them because there's elements there of everything.
And I think they did it all very well. It didn't come out as forced. It came out as like a natural progression.
You always felt it was them. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's where we are right now. It's like we're kind of going more. I still want to keep a little bit of like what we originally had. I don't want to get rid of that. I just want to like, at least right now, maybe because it's, after COVID, we can actually go and tour again. I just want to hit chords and just have this energy,
Yeah.
and go
Maybe
out
this is a good time to ask you this, man. And of course, by all means, if this is a proper time to brag, certainly do so and brag. But from what I see on your website, it almost looked like when, like when the guys who were quoted starting the band with you in 2016, you would have been 19 years old. They almost made it like you were some type of a prodigy, man. Were you somebody that took to the guitar very early and please tell us if you're a prodigy. Boast about it.
It's funny. They all call me that. I don't. I think I take pride in my playing for sure, and I think I'm proud of the fact that I started early enough to be proficient. Yeah. I started when I was 13, so I didn't start super early. But I'll be honest with you, I grew up with players that even to this day make me look like a joke. So I think that's why it's like I don't view myself as a prodigy. I view myself as someone that got good to a point and had a focus on what I wanted to do. Like, I love listening to jazz. I'm not a jazz guitar player.
Right.
I'm not going to go out and try and be that. I want it to
Right.
be Ace Frehley. I want it to be Slash. I want it to be, Jimmy Page. I want it to be a rock star. And that's kind of what I focused my playing on. If I can pick up, stuff here and there that adds to my playing, great. But the true prodigies I know are guys that can pick it up and play like anything.
Yeah.
And I'm not like that.
I'm from New York. I'm in upstate New York. With people, when I tell people I'm from New York, they instantly defer like immediately to the city, as if there's no other parts of New York other than just Brooklyn and the Bronx.
I love upstate New York, though.
Yeah, but I'm smack dab in central New York, so I equate the closest big city. I'm in between Syracuse and Utica. And speaking of prodigies, and not a lot of great musical stuff has come out of upstate New York, man. But a great blues guitar player, Smoking Joe Bonamassa.
Joe Bonamassa, baby, Utica.
And he's somebody that I would think of because he's obviously somebody that's come out of this area that I live in here and become like a relatively big deal, man. I would consider him like a prodigy. Seems like he started very young.
Yeah, and he really was, because I mean he was playing on a much better level than me by like the age of like 9. So
yeah,
he really got, and it's amazing actually. He got it together. He got it together really quick. And he did his thing. His story, because his story of success is very interesting because it didn't happen like that. It was like child prodigy. And then he joined that Bloodline band, and then it just came crashing down, and he had to pull himself up and really basically work his ass off to get back to where he is now. And it took him a very long time to do that, but work ethic.
Well, thankfully, it seems like somebody got in his ear and told him, and this is not to certainly, impugn the guys in Bloodline, but Joe is a guy, man, that deserves, much like an Eric Clapton or something, to be out in the front of the stage and being showcased. He's not just a guy in the band, a hired gun. You know what I mean? Like he's a guy. He
was the talent, even in that band, and he'll say this, like the best thing about getting fired from that band is that it forced him to start singing, and that was what started the path for the rest of his career. And you know, I sing. I don't like being a lead vocalist personally
Right.
because it's just way too much stress. I rather just go up there and hit chords and rock and roll. But
Yeah. Yeah, I get that.
solo and all that. But I more power to him. I think it's fantastic. And I've seen a couple of his shows, and just from a sound quality point of view alone, I mean, it is the
Yeah.
sonically probably the best show I've ever seen in my life. Like, it's incredible.
Shout out Smoking Joe Bonamassa.
Yeah, man.
He might be the
Take
best
us on
export of
tour.
Utica, New York. He might be the only export of Utica, New York at this point. I don't know, man, but certainly the best representation of Utica, and not much has come out of
Yeah.
little old Utica, New York, man. But now I'm interested in like where you stand as a band on like the release format, because it seems like with attention spans having dwindled, especially post COVID. I've gotten this conversation with a lot of guys out here. LP versus EP. Are people still listening to LPs all the way through? Does it even make sense financially, man? Or EPs or singles the way to go? And what you guys seem to have done is you did do an EP in 2020, but now it seems like you've got a bunch of singles all leading up to this Redemption Chronicles, which is more or less like all these songs finally put together on one piece of work.
It is, but the way I view it is like, there's a lot of people that don't quite, you know, they've never heard of us before, and the album is the perfect way to like be like, hey, here we are.
Yeah.
And if it were up to me, I would do nothing but albums. Like, I think EPs are great starting out, but and I'm sure every music business expert will be like, oh, you're wrong on this, but I think there's more power in albums. I listen to everything all the way through. I think an album is a musical snapshot on where you are in that time period.
Well said.
And I don't think EPs have the same effect. And singles definitely don't. I think, you know, if you can find success doing that, great. And, you know, obviously we're still going to be releasing singles because, you know, there's radio and all that. But for me, it's about the album, and it's about, let's create the album. And then, hey, if we need, you know, a single here or there, then we'll work on that. But it's about the musical journey and the musical experience. Like, I love being in the studio. A lot of people don't. I love it.
Yeah.
And you know, I rather take a little extra time to do an album. And financially for us, I mean, you know, well, financially, it's hard right now for everyone.
Sure.
But as far as, you know, album versus EP, this album has done extremely well, and it's done more to get new fans to us than, in my opinion, the EPs have.
Yeah.
And people want to own vinyl again, and I think it's great. Let's embrace it, you know?
Yeah.
That they want the vinyl, they want the CDs, and, you know, if they're on Spotify or wherever they're streaming, you know, they want to click play and do what they're doing and let the music kind of absorb them. And, you know, I'm kind of the same way. I grew up in the CD era, so, you know, for me, it was put the CD in the car and go for a drive. But, you know, I'm an album guy. I like albums, and I think that, you know, when I'm writing, I'm thinking, how will this sound good as a whole thing, you know? And if we need to split something here or there for radio on the single, great. But, you know, for me, it's about the album. I can't, you know, I'm not speaking for everyone, but that's just my personal view.
So does it make you feel like, as an artist, you know, that if a record company or somebody is putting pressure on you to do an EP, it almost feels like, as an artist, you're being cut off at the knees? You know what I mean? Like, you want to put out this full body of work, which encompasses a story usually, or there's some type of a theme behind it. You know what I mean? Like, and you might need a certain amount of songs and or minutes to achieve that.
I think EPs are great for like an in-between period, but even at the same time, it's like, nowadays, just making an album. You know, because what a lot of these, I know the country guys are really doing this, but they'll do an album and then they'll do, it's the deluxe version, which is basically an album and an EP thrown on it, you know, to make additional songs, which I think is, you know, whatever. But, you know, I can see something like that. An EP would be cool. Like, hey, you know, here's like an in-between thing. It's more, you know, not artistically trying to focus everything. It's more, hey, let's go in, do songs, release them, go on tour. Great. But, you know, outside of that, I would just spend the extra time making the perfect thing. And then when people do finally see it, it blows them away. You know, I rather do that than, you know, kind of cobble together something really quickly, just, because we need an EP. But, you know, and it's funny because we do things, the new school way of doing things is, you're making the art to promote the tour. And we sort of do it backwards, where it's like, well, we're doing the tour to promote the art, and that was the old school way back in the day. Is that
Yeah.
the best thing to be doing? Probably not from a
Right.
business point of view, but from an artistic point of view, it's great. And I don't need an excuse to go tour. If you want me to throw something out to go tour, great. But I
Yeah.
want it to be good.
Yeah.
And
Well, but
because people aren't dumb. I think that's the thing.
right.
People, they can tell, especially now, like when you're trying to just throw something out just to sell it or just to promote something.
Yeah.
If that's the case, I'd rather do a live record or something and then go out and tour that, or
Yeah.
something that is more like, hey, this is for fun, this is for you. If we're doing something that's supposed to be an artistic statement, then let's take the time and make it great.
And now,
In
do you
my
enjoy
opinion.
touring? Because obviously that's a big part of the business, but it is a nomadic lifestyle. You're living out of a suitcase. You're often in a van or on a bus. You know what I mean? You miss your creature comforts and your stuff at home or whatever. But it is a necessary part of the business to be out there grinding on the road, man. You said it yourself. As a band nowadays, you're out there. You're hoping the merchandise sells. You got to be out there and be a face out there in the live music community. Do you like that part of the business, though, the touring part?
I love it, to be honest with you. We had a blast on this tour. I just like going out and playing. It's just something about, when you step on stage and, you have your guitar and your amps humming and the band's like together and everyone's vibing. And,
Yeah.
especially if you have a crowd that's really into it. And thankfully on this tour, the crowd gave us so much energy every night. It was incredible. And I just live for that. I think that was great. And to me, again, new school versus old school. The new school way is, post something on TikTok or Instagram, and that's great. I'm not against that, and I try my best to do that. But the old school way, I think, works better for us. Is go out, play, and meet people the old-fashioned way by winning them over at a live show. And I love going on stage and just killing myself to get people into us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love it. I do enjoy. The off time's nice. It's like right now. I'm kind of trying to recover, but
Yeah.
and but if I'm not on tour, then put me in a studio writing and recording a record. But outside of that, let's get on the road, let's play, let's have some fun, let's build the band up the old fashioned way. And
Well,
I grew up on Kiss, I grew up on Def Leppard,
yeah.
the bands that played giant stadiums. I mean, to me, that's what it's all about. It's about playing in front of people.
Now, where do you stand on, because you are trying to launch your band, and everyone is trying to get people to stream or buy albums or whatever. When you're angling for new fans and you are still a relatively new band, is it disheartening that technology now plays a big part, and sometimes the talent can get lost in that, whereas opposed to how visible you are? Like, obviously we're doing a podcast right now,
Yes.
but the visibility and the technology now, it seems like it's all about followers and who's looking at you on Instagram and this and that. Where do you guys stand on, as a band, on it seems like you got to be some type of a presence now on one of these platforms or more, and be technologically present or available?
I embrace it to a point. Like I don't want to be a gimmick. I see a lot of bands and people and artists doing these like gimmicky things. I'm not into that. But on this tour, this was the best online presence, ironically, we ever had, was doing this tour, because we didn't need a gimmick.
Yeah.
We just, hey, here's what we're doing day to day, and it was cool enough that people wanted to follow and embrace it.
Yeah.
So just go out and be yourself is my opinion, but put as much as you can online, and I think people will see that
Yeah.
more than hey, let's do a TikTok reel with like a cat or something.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
And so, how soon do you and maybe you guys as a band have talked about this too? How long should you wait? Between giving the market pieces of new art. I mean, that used to be a little more of a standard formula back in the day. A band would put out an album in the 80s, say, for instance, and then they would tour it, and it would marinate for a while, and it would be like 2-3 years, minimum, where suddenly you'd hear a buzz about, oh, they're going to be coming out with a new album pretty soon. Has that time cycle changed? Like, what's a good format for how much you should be, divulging to the public?
I think it depends band to band. I think now everything obviously has gotten, way of a shorter attention span. I think for us, we used to do an EP or even two EPs sometime every year.
Yeah.
And we'd have, 1 or 2 singles from that. I think now it's, with this album obviously being our first full album, I think we're probably going to do another single, hopefully, and try and, let this album really breathe and get out there. But
Yeah,
I'm writing and recording, and John is too,
yeah,
together, and we're coming up with new stuff. So I would say you I'd like to get something else out that's outside of this album,
yeah.
either by late 2025 or maybe 2026, but it might be earlier. I don't know. It really depends how things go and how inspired we feel. I think, this month we're kind of taking a break, it sounds like, but then we'll probably reconvene and start really hammering it again and see what comes out.
Now,
But
are you somebody that likes to be involved in multiple musical projects? I get guys on here that just amaze me. They'll have their toe dipped in like 3, 4, 5 projects. And, I'm bitching about doing a podcast and working like a day job. You know what I mean? Like, where are the hours in the day? Are you somebody that
yeah.
puts all your focus into just Stone Horses, or are you involved in other creative endeavors?
So I actually love the idea of being involved in multiple creative endeavors, and I hope to do more of that in the future. But right now, all the eggs are in Stone Horses in
Yeah,
that basket. And I've talked with John about this multiple times. I think to really make something happen, you got to kind of just put the blinders on for a bit and
yeah,
just really put all your eggs in that basket. My goal is to really build this band up, and then maybe once we're a little more established, then I could be like, okay, because I do want to do like, a solo thing here or there eventually, or maybe start something that's more like, the metally side or this or that. And I think that's all great. And I look forward to doing that eventually, just for fun and just, for artistic sake. But right now the focus is how can we make this band as amazing as it possibly can be. And
yeah.
and that's where my focus is now with, my writing and everything. Is just like I'm focused on whatever the next record's going to be, and or whatever, and
And when
and
you
just
talk
getting
about
it all
another
out.
project, when you talk about another
Stone Horses.
project more, to use your words, metally, does that mean you'd like to do a project that would that would lean heavier than what Stone Horses does? I'm assuming you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, like kind of, because I listen to all kinds of different music as you do too, and
Sure.
I think it would be fun to do, more of like, Jaron and I, when because Jaron actually filled in for our bass player Dylan for a number of dates on this tour. And,
Yeah.
him and I are both really in the Blue Murder. And I'm like, man, something like that would be cool to do. It's just like a side thing or
Yeah.
whatever. But
Yeah.
even with that, like, I guess it depends. Like, I look up to guys like Mark Tremonti who are somehow able to do like 5 different bands, and all of them, he
Yeah.
makes it so they're
I know.
massively successful.
Go off.
But so it'd be cool to do that one day. But I think for me, I think home is always going to be Stone Horses. It just feels
Yeah.
right. So it's less of like, oh, I want to go and do this and do that, and be a big ego head or whatever.
Right.
I think it's more like, as an artist, sometimes you got to get some stuff out that wouldn't quite work with the
Yeah.
main project, and then you come back to the main project, and it's like, you feel like you can breathe again, and you get all these new great ideas that you
Yeah.
didn't have before. Because it's a release more than anything of like other stuff that you're coming up with. But right now, everything I'm coming up with is like, how can we make this amazing with Stone Horses, whether it be a riff or a whole song or this or that. I've been recording on my voice memo on my phone.
Yeah.
John will play something when we're warming up before a show. I'm like, hey, let me record that.
Yeah.
What is it? Just, whatever you're playing there. It sounds cool.
Yeah.
We'll worry about it later, but
You're
like, let's
planting a
just get
seed. Yeah.
that.
You're planting a seed for potential, for potential art to happen. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
I hear a lot of guys, man, if fucking divulge the trick with the humming or singing something, a riff or something into a
Oh
phone.
yeah.
I'm not a
And I
musician.
think,
I'm not a musician myself, so I'm always like intrigued by like how that starts, man. Like when Stone Horses, man. Like when you've written a great song, man, and you look back, what's typically what was the impetus for the song? Like what comes first in a great song? Is it a riff that comes to mind? Is it a title? Is it a first line?
for us, it usually is the riff, I would say, or a
Yeah,
melody line.
yeah,
But at the same time, some of the stuff has been, maybe a lyric or a phrase that like John will come up with, like, ooh, that's an interesting way of looking at stuff. Let me write, something that kind of invokes that emotion or whatever,
yeah,
maybe come up with. But that's kind of how I try and start stuff, is just whatever inspires me in that moment, that spark, and then let it blossom from there. But a lot of times it's stuff I hear, like riffs or because like Keith Richards said with when he did Satisfaction, it's kind of that was his version of the voice memo on the cell phone. He had like a little tape recorder, it wakes up da 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 da, and 20 minutes of him snoring.
Yeah,
but it's just that spark that starts everything.
Well, I gotta say, one song, "Crosses to Bear." As I was listening to it, it made me think of "Come Together" by the Beatles.
Yeah, I hear everyone saying that. A lot of
Very
people are really
much
digging
so.
that one.
Yeah,
it's a cool song for sure.
Yeah, very cool. And hey, I mean, come on, there's nothing wrong with being compared to the fucking Beatles if you're going to be compared to somebody, for fuck's sake. And of course, me being a boxing fan, I love a band that has a song called "Fuck Around, Find Out." I mean, come on.
That's my favorite one to play live. We usually close with that song, and that one. It just goes. It is the perfect song to end with because people are already by then, hopefully we've won them over, and that song is just like that final, bam. And I think one of the shows we did, it was in Sayreville, because we'll end that in like a big chord and then like a final note, and I was so energetic. And that I can't remember, Starland Ballroom. Yeah. It's a big place, but the stage is like a little smaller than normal. So like I did my final hit and like, I throw my guitar around and I clipped the mic and the mic came down and I fell on stage and just blah, 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 and then I got up and was like, and then the crowd went crazy. But it's like there's always something happens during that song. It's just there's so much energy with that song. And I think at the end of the day, that's what I thrive off of with rock and roll that other genres don't always have is energy. That there's no better energy than rock and roll music.
Now, the last couple of episodes, I have gone away because the conversations have gotten so good that I've gone away from some of my staples, man. You know what I mean? Like my subjective questions that I always thread in here. So I'm bound and determined to get a couple in on you tonight, man. So, so from a fan standpoint, is there a gig that you've attended where you were in the audience that really stuck with you and blew you away? Something that you got a chance to see live?
First time, many times I've seen them, but definitely the first time I saw Kix from Baltimore, absolutely blew me away. And that's what made me want to step up my game for like, moving on stage. Because by then I'd seen some great acts, but they all kind of just, I won't say they stood there, but you could tell they were kind of whatever. And here comes Steve Whiteman with a fuse lit on the end of his mic spinning around and just, they're all doing splits in unison, and he takes the balloons out and he just body slams them, and it's just like I'd never seen anything like that. I still haven't. That just blew me away. So I was like, all right, I got to step it up.
All right, so what about this one right here? If the Stone Horses could be on a dream bill, you could play with another band or two. I guess a lot of rock bills nowadays are 3 bands. Is there a couple of bands that would just be like bucket list bands for you to share a bill with?
So the goal for me and the dream for me has always been to headline. Like I that's, not to sound like an ego head or anything, but that's just like, our personal goal. But, if I had to pick, I'd go out with Steel Panther again in a heartbeat. That would probably be number 1. Yeah. Outside of that, I would say, some of these up and coming rock bands like Dirty Honey, the band Feel, there's a band called Ace Monroe that are great. I'd love to do a tour with them. Stuff like that. Bigger bands, I'd love to go out with Guns N' Roses. Because they're still kicking it. They're still amazing. And
big crowd.
I'm trying to think. I was gonna say like, go out with Kiss. Like, oh no, they retired. Oh, Aerosmith. Oh no, they're retired. It's like so many of them. It's a shame,
Well, we don't know. Well, I mean, we don't know how many more legs Kiss will add to this farewell tour.
Well, that's true.
There's no end in sight, man.
The next reunion tour, I hope to be on.
So I wouldn't just say that you missed the boat on playing with Kiss just yet.
If they ever reunite, I'm there in a heartbeat. But,
Well, didn't they say like wasn't Gene's big master plan, man? Like was to make Kiss be eternal and just always be rotating 4 new guys in there to wear the makeup. That's what he said.
Coming to a city near you, Kiss holograms with Stone Horses opening.
Well, it would either be the holograms idea, or he was literally talking about. At one point, I saw in interviews, he was talking about 4 actual guys just always wearing the makeup, paying homage, and it being just a revolving cast of like new guys all the time. You know what I mean? So
that would be pretty wild. It would be, as much as I love Ace, it would be a little weird wearing his makeup just because and nothing against Tommy Thayer because he's great, but
with all due respect, it'd be better to invent new Kiss characters, maybe.
Yeah, now that would be cool. That would be like a really neat thing to try. I don't know. I think
no Starman, no Catman, no any of that stuff.
I don't know what I'd be. I'd probably be the sheepdog, but
paint your face white and turn yourself into a dog. Why not?
That's
Peter
right.
With a cat. So what's the plan, man? As far as like now, like this album just came out, and I don't have the date on here, but the Redemption Chronicles been out how long now?
Oh man, when did we release it?
October? I want to
Yeah,
say.
I think it was October. I think it was the 25th. I'm probably wrong on this. It was sometime in October. We actually did a show the day it came out. We headlined a show in our local venue, Soundstage, which was incredible. The place was packed, and everyone was so passionate about it, and that warmed my heart for sure.
And then you go out on this run with Steel Panther.
Yeah, like right afterward. It was like perfect. It couldn't have been.
And, so
and it was funny.
Now?
We didn't know we were going out with them at the time. That came like almost last minute. It was like I think we had like 2 weeks to get our stuff together.
Yeah.
And go out with them. So it was like really just like a wonderful surprise pretty much out of nowhere. It was like, oh shit, all right, we better better get it together.
We're gonna do
Here
this.
we go.
Yeah. And so, what does 2025 hope to hold for band or for Stone Horses? What would you like to see? What would you like to see happen for the band? Obviously, with this album still being relatively new, I would imagine some more live gigs.
I definitely live gigs. Yeah, I would love to go on tour again. Whether it be with Steel Panther or anybody else. There's some other. I've been hearing things of other acts. I can't really talk on it right now that we might hopefully go out with, but I think if all goes well, the goal is sometime maybe in March to go out on tour again. I would love to do I'd love to do some either hometown gigs or gigs around here that are like more one-off stuff as well.
Upstate New York would be nice. Don't forget upstate New York.
Yeah, I would do it in a heartbeat. Well, and that's the thing. It's like, we met so many people on this tour from all over, at least the East Coast and the Midwest. And every single one of them are like, please come down. We want to come to the show, and we're going to bring people. And that's why I love touring, because it's like, that's how you make fans. And then the next time you go out, you get more people and then more people. And like I said, that's why I want to get to the point where we can headline, because it's, then you can start building a real family and build like, a real solid, loyal base.
Yeah.
And, like you were talking about Joe Bonamassa, how did he do it? Well, he probably gone on a tour too, but for the most part, he did it the hard way. Just go out, and whether, you're opening or you're headlining, just, play and give it 110%, whether there's 100 people there or 2 people there, and just keep revisiting it. And, if you're good and you're good to your fans, you get more and more and more each time. And that's just what I want to do. I want to go out and build it up the old fashioned way, know.
I like
so
that.
I hope touring and playing, whether it be with someone else or if we have to headline, great, let's do it. I'll play the dumpster out back. I do not care.
Available to
one person there, I'm down to play.
Stone Horses coming to a dumpster near you.
That's right.
Now, what about like in terms of like when you've been out there, circulating out there in the world, doing shows, doing tours, festivals, wherever you've been, and this doesn't even necessarily have to be a musician, I guess, per se. Mm-hmm. But have you had the opportunity to meet anybody that really blew you away? Like somebody that you were, for lack of a better word, starstruck to get a chance to meet?
I mean, a lot of the Steel Panther guys, for one, because I grew up, when Field of Steel came out, I went and saw that tour. So that was amazing in and of itself. Meeting Slash, that wasn't with Stone Horses, obviously. That was back when it was still Charm City Devils, but meeting Slash was really wild. Trying to think who else we've gotten lucky to open for some.
Slash is a big
Billy
one.
Sheehan was another one, because I'm a big David Lee Roth fan, and he was part of the Eat 'Em and Smile tour. So sitting and talking about that, and talking about what it was like, hanging with Roth and all that was pretty wild.
That's Pops, man. Yeah. Diamond Dave. I mean, come on, man, an awesome showman. I can't help it. I got the David Lee Roth shtick going on, but you're the one that brought it up. So now we'll go into chatting about Roth for a little bit. What is it it's so great about him, though, man, that you find so great about him?
He's just everything that was great about that era.
Yeah.
All in one. It's like if I were to pick, like, if someone, if an alien came to Earth and was like, tell me what it was like, in the 1980s, point to David Lee Roth, man. Diamond Dave. That's everything you got to know. He's he's sunshine and beaches and, whiskey and women and everything. And it's just great.
Super charismatic and really able to deliver the goods, from a physicality standpoint on stage. The picks, the splits, all the crazy shit he
everything.
Can do.
And I grew up listening to, I love Van Halen, but I also love, which I think it's overlooked, his two or three solo albums that he came out with. I remember seeing, was it the video to Just Like Paradise, where it opens up with him
Yeah.
He's doing like this kick flip and he like kicks this balloon and like,
Yeah.
pops it like right in the middle of this, like, it's like, who's doing that these days? Nobody. It's like,
And it's like he went from and then he went from playing with Eddie Van Halen to playing with Steve Vai. Not too
oh
bad.
yeah,
He found
the
himself
best
good guitar
guitar
players.
players,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I thought that was a great addition because he almost, you know, Eddie was obviously amazing, and I think they were two different types that made it work together. But what was cool with Vi was, Vi's a very zany type of player, and Dave's a very zany guy. So it almost elevated Dave even more into that Diamond Dave persona with those two, and Billy Sheehan as well, and Greg Bissonette, and just one hell of a band. It's like, musicians that can play their ass off, but it's still very much about a cohesive thing, about the songs and the show and just everything into this one wonderful package of just amazing showmanship and just the best time you could ever have, sober.
Well, I think I think Dave felt a little jilted, man, because things had gone fucking south or whatever, man. So he wasn't about to leave and not put together a kick-ass band around him because I think he probably, the competitive side of him probably looked at like, okay, I'll show these guys. You know what I mean? I'm
absolutely.
Together. So he's almost got to assemble some fucking badasses around him.
And what a band. I mean, you couldn't have picked a better band. And I wish, the only thing with Dave that I wish they would have done is I wish they would have filmed some like pro shot, like concert footage or something, because I would love to see that, because you have a little bit of that with Van Halen.
Yeah.
Just to have seen that with that first tour with the Eat 'Em and Smile era would have just been off the hook. But even the bootlegs, filmed from some crappy camera up in the nosebleeds, and the thing's still exciting as hell. It's like, I can't even imagine what it was like to actually be there. It must have been mind blowing.
And so if I were to take you, Ted, drop you on a desert island and you can only take one album, what's the desert island album pick?
Kiss Alive 2, I would say.
You said that with some confidence, man. I will say on the confidence meter, that was pretty good. I mean, you spilled that out in about 3 seconds.
That's probably, I don't know if that counts as an album because it's a live album, but that's the one.
Oh, I'll let you have it. I mean, you obviously feel a certain way about it, man. This is essentially the soundtrack to your death. I mean, you're dying on a desert island with this one fucking album. So, it obviously behooves you to make sure that it's something that resonates with you, speaks to you, or that you could at least see yourself dying to.
Yeah, it would be a good album to die to. It's
a grim prognosis.
At least the live stuff. Like I would turn it off after Rocket Ride is done. I didn't really dig the non-Ace studio stuff. Nothing against Bob Kulick, but it just that stuff didn't resonate with me as much. But like everything from the live stuff through Rocket Ride was like, it's just, to me, that was like them at their zenith. It was just everything that was great about that band right there in a little time capsule of an album.
Obviously Britain has given us like a lot of the, like when people say, okay, start throwing out a list of all the legendary bands. You start to look at your Rolling Stones and your Beatles and your Floyds and your Zeppelins and your Who, and you start to think, holy shit, everybody's from fucking England who are legendary bands. So like when you think about our great American rock bands, who wins the battle? It's been debated. Is it Kiss? Is it Aerosmith? Is it somebody else? I mean, who's our best representation of American rock and roll?
Well, I think the big three is for American rock and roll is Kiss, Aerosmith, and Van Halen. If I were to just throw it out there, and there's other amazing bands too, like like Rat and all that.
What about Bon Jovi? Does Bon Jovi enter the equation?
They do. They're a little different, because they were more rock with a pop edge, which is what they were going for from day one. And they're an amazing live band. Back, like if you watch anything from the New Jersey tour, I mean, they were incredible. So I would say yes, but for just more of a straight up, hitching hard kind of like, rock thing. Obviously for me, it's going to be Kiss, but Kiss and Aerosmith are pretty neck and neck, and Van Halen definitely, at least, I would say the Roth era of Van Halen's up there. I love the Sammy era too. I think that was incredible, but again, that they were kind of going through a different thing. But if you're talking just straight up rock, the Roth era of Van Halen right up there with Aerosmith and Kiss, in my opinion.
Where do you think a band like Pearl Jam stands? All of a sudden, man, like you look up and they've been doing it for 35 years, man. Do they deserve to be one of the great American rock and roll bands?
Yeah, I mean, I have respect for them. I'm not the biggest fan. I love 10, and I think the fact that they've been doing it for so long is great. So yeah, I'd give it to them. Yeah.
I feel like they lost me a little bit more as the albums kept coming out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
My
I
opinion.
mean, I thought like when I first heard Even Flow, I mean that blew me away. It was something just so different
Yeah.
and fresh. Kind of like what you were saying in the beginning is, they took something that hadn't been done before and they mixed a different element into it and you had
Yeah.
something really fresh, unique and wonderful. And that song at least is a perfect example of that. And yeah, they definitely deserve their spot. If nothing else for going at it as long as they have and on that level. I
Now, do
think
you
is
think it's a cool?
incredible.
Now, do you think it's a cool accolade, or like I know a lot of people have like thumbed their nose at it or whatever, man? But is it a cool accolade still in the rock world to go into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? I know it's been, it's been ballyhooed back and forth that they don't let the right people in, or they haven't let certain people in, or other artists got in before other more deserving artists.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on the whole Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
I definitely think it's still an accolade to get in. I mean, it's incredible. I think that's why people are so passionate about it. If it was something that no one really cared about, no one would
No one
still
would
be
talk
talking
about
about
it.
it.
Yeah, you're
But
right.
I do agree too. Like there's been some controversial acts that have gone in that people have disagreed with that I've agreed with.
Yeah.
And vice versa. There's acts that are in there that I absolutely shouldn't be in, or at least shouldn't be in yet. Like I was talking to my buddy about this, like, all respect to Kate Bush as an artist, but to have her go in before Iron Maiden just makes
Yeah.
no sense
Yeah.
whatsoever, no matter how you spin it.
I think a lot of it has to do with the impact that they made, though. Because look, they also put a band like Nirvana in, who really only had a 3-year in terms of power in their career, man. But it was, I guess, they got in because of Kurt as a songwriter and just the impact that they made from '91 to '94.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that because at the end, like I'm not the biggest Nirvana fan, but Nevermind's an amazing record.
Yeah.
And it changed the world, love it or hate it.
Yep.
I think that's kind of been a spin, like, oh, grunge killed hair metal. It's like, no, it really didn't. It was the next thing.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't them, it would have been something else. And it is what it is. But it's at the end of the day, it's great music and it's inspired a lot of people. And, I remember someone arguing with me like, oh, Guns N' Roses doesn't deserve to be in because they only released, 2 albums. It's like, well, yeah, but it was 2 albums that changed the entire world. And, they went from being a club act to being a stadium act in like 2 years.
Yeah.
So, I don't care if they never release anything else for the rest of their life. Yeah, they deserve it.
I think they deserve
and
it.
Nothing else for the influence they had on me. So,
I mean, the Appetite for Destruction, those 2 Use Your Illusions. Well, we got more than that from, right? We got the Spaghetti.
We got
Incident.
Lies and we got Spaghetti Incident.
Yeah. So that's not a bad palette of work,
Oh yeah.
By any means.
And it's amazing. And at the end of the day, and this is what I was saying with albums versus EPs, it's amazing work that's going to hold up forever.
Yeah.
And like I said, I don't care if that's all they ever release. We keep hearing, oh, they might come out with a new record, and I hope they do. I think it'd be great. But
yeah,
if that's all they ever do, you know what? Hey, that it's every single thing is timeless that they've come out with. And I'll take that over a band that released, 27 albums, but 2 of them are good.
Yeah. All right, let's get back into promo of Stone Horses. Before I let you out of here, I certainly want to let people know, man, like, where's the best place to tap in and get their Stone Horses info? Website, Instagram, where are you guys easiest to find?
The easiest to find is Facebook and Instagram, and we have a website, stonehorsesmusic.com. that we have all the newest updates, and you can get all kinds of records and merch and anything else you want from that. Yeah. So that's always a plus. But if you want the latest stuff, off the cuff, Instagram and Facebook are great. Yeah. And I think we're on TikTok too. I don't personally have a TikTok.
somebody probably put you on there, man.
I'm pretty sure we're on there.
Yeah. Apparently nowadays, man, if you want to be a successful band, you've got to check all the platform boxes.
I think with that and what I would tell younger bands is embrace it. It's great. Do it if you want to do it. But, I've heard so many things, when I was a kid, it was like, oh, you got to live in New York or LA or you're not going to make it. Or, it's always something like that. It's like at the end of the day, make music, record it if you have the means and go out and play. And the rest, embrace it if you can. But if you have, have guitar will travel. If you have it in your heart. Go for it.
But back in the pre-internet days, though, it was still a big deal. I guess a different artistic format, but it was a big deal if you were a musician, you know what I mean, to get into magazines. It would have been back then, get into Metal Edge or Rip Magazine or, you know, I mean, Hit Parader.
And you know, I think that's basically what you know, maybe not Facebook, like you know, Instagram, TikTok, you know, having a reel that goes viral or whatever. I guess that's the modern day equivalent. You know, I embrace it all. I think it's all great. You know, I don't look at anything like, oh, I would never do that. It's like, oh, you know, as long as, like I said, as long as it's not like a gimmicky thing and it's, you know, us being us, do it all. But, you know, I still, for me personally, you know, write, record, tour is still seems to be the best thing, and everything else kind of helps lift that up, if that makes any sense.
Well said.
And doing, you know, like what we're doing here with your podcast is, you know, this is a great example of, you know, we didn't have this, you know, 10, 20 years ago, and this is awesome, you know.
I love cool. This. It is cool. It would have just been somebody coming from Hit Parader taking a picture of you guys, and you would just be looking at it in print. You know what I mean? This is more like this is more like the magazine coming to life.
Yeah, exactly. And I embrace that side of it. I think it's great. And I think, you know, anything like, you know, the podcasts or whatever else the kids are into these days, which I'm not the one to ask for that, but you know, well, embrace it all, man. It's all good.
I was looking forward to this, man. I knew it was going to be a lot of fun talking with you, man. It definitely was. For sure, stay in touch, man. When shit's going on, I'd love to have you back on from time to time. I love what you do, man.
Definitely.
Bro. Yeah, I'm a fan, man, for sure.
I appreciate it, man. From the bottom of my heart and the rest of the guys, we really do appreciate it. And I had a blast, and I cannot wait to come back on and,
thank you, man.
You know, shoot the shit with music. I mean, you can, you know, throw out musical stuff, and I will talk all day long.
I will, man. You better be careful if you want to insert me into your life.
Oh man, dude, it's all good. I'm
seriously, it was a lot of fun, man. Definitely stay in touch. We'll do it again. It was an honor, man. Thank you. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you, man. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Good talking to you, Ted.
Peace out, man.
All right. Later, brother. There he goes, folks. Ted Merrill, guitar player for Stone Horses. That's a band that I want to give a double Rexx Ruger approved to. I love what these guys do. I think we just dubbed it alt blues. Think very much in the vein of a much heavier, riffed out Black Crowes. Like Black Crowes goes Soundgarden, morphed in with elements of blues. Certainly heavy, certainly riff driven, amazing rock and roll that these guys do. Phenomenal vocalist, phenomenal band, and Ted Merrill, the guitar player, who was once a 19-year-old prodigy, no more. That was then, this is now, but still an amazing guitar player, man. And just to become a prodigy on any level is fucking amazing, man. I'm a podcast prodigy, so take that, huh? I'm a prodigy, and of course, I'm a prodigy because I'm the offspring of a prodigy, being Diamond Dave Jr. So I'm a double prodigy, and that's rare, I think. But anyway, thank you to Ted Merrill, man. Go check out Stone Horses. Their album just came out in October. They had released a bunch of singles, and then they put out Redemption, Chronicles. That's out there right now. And they also did an EP back in 2020 called Good Old Days. You will not be disappointed, man. This is a fucking powerhouse band that I absolutely fucking love. So go check them out, man. Make sure to like and follow Pod Scum on Facebook. Let me give myself another look here just to check out the quaff. I've held up amazingly, like I always do. Should be no surprise at this point. Didn't even need a spritz, but you might. That being said, also like, subscribe, hit the notification bell to stay tapped in on this channel. This is where it all goes down, and it went down here in a big way thanks to Ted Merrill from Stone Horses, fresh off his tour with the legendary Steel Panther. So definitely go check out Stone Horses at the internet website that he gave. The band has a website, Instagram, yada, yada, yada. They're on all that shit because you got to be. Ted knows it. I know it. They're out there. You know, I have a hard time finding Stone Horses, man. So go hip yourself to them. And like I always say when I end these things, remember to take it easy and keep it sleazy.